Good morning, everybody. I'm Tim O'Brien. I'm the senior executive editor of Bloomberg Opinion, and I am joined this morning by two of my esteemed columnists and resident smarties, Matt Iglesias and Mary Ellen Kloss. They both cover politics and policy for us. Sometimes they also diverge into other interesting things, but that's their core competencies. And this morning, we're going to talk about a big bear of a bill that Donald Trump and his compatriots in the GOP and on Capitol Hill want to try to ram through Congress optimistically, I think, within Trump's first 100 days in office. He gets inaugurated in less than 2 weeks. And it is a truly omnibus bill. I want to just start us off with a quote from Jason Smith, who is a Missouri Republican. He's the head of the House Ways and Means Committee. He told Fox News in December, we need a reconciliation bill that has border, energy, permitting, and tax. You put all four of those things together, we can deliver on that. But, you know, that's easier said than done. If we think back to the first Trump administration, one of the signature issues they tried to tackle coming right out of the gates was overturning the Affordable Care Act. And they were unable to pull the pieces together and get that done. Trump famously held a Rose Garden ceremony after their efforts were defeated. He called the defeat a victory and he moved on. This is much more complicated. And the bill is emblematic of a lot of the marquee policy standards Trump campaigned on. So what we're going to try to do today is discuss the bill itself as a big package and then maybe some of its pieces. So with all of that in mind, Matt, just set the table around how hard is it to get a bill of this magnitude through Congress quickly?
Sure. Republicans are looking at a very narrow majority in the House of Representatives. And it's, they've had a lot of trouble wrangling the furthest right members of that caucus historically. There's presumably some frontline members who may have some concerns about different kinds of things. The House philosophy that's driving this, Chairman Smith's view, is that border and energy legislation are such winners for Republicans that if you tie them together with the sort of a big tax bill is just inevitably going to be complicated and disappoint some people. But his view is that if you connect that to a bill increasing immigration enforcement spending and increasing oil and gas drilling, that those energy and border provisions will be so compelling that it will sort of force Republicans, recalcitrant members, to swallow their qualms and get on board for the tax thing. The Senate Republicans had been thinking the opposite. John Thune's bill was, we can get some kind of energy, drill baby drill legislation done. That will raise some revenue. We can put that revenue into border enforcement and we can pass that quickly. And then we'll deliver a win for Trump. And then we can take months to kind of argue about the details of taxes. Trump seems to have decided he agrees with Chairman Smith about this. Maybe that's right. I wouldn't say that the current group of House Republican leaders have any practical experience passing big controversial pieces of legislation. So I don't know. They know their caucus maybe better than I do or better than John Thune does, but they've never done anything like this before.
Mary Ellen, what actually we were talking about this before we started. There's still a lot of mystery around what the real components of this bill will be. I think that the GOP is hoping to have a reconciliation bill ready on January 20th to go to Trump and then to go through the hard work of pulling the strings together. They want to get it out of the House in early April, out of the Senate in late April, and signed by Trump within that magical first 100 days. But what does this look like to you at this point?
It looks to me like it's very practically enormously heavy lifting. And I say that because, as Matt mentioned, there isn't a lot of history here. These two leaders, John Thune and the House Majority Leader are both really kind of early in rallying their members and figuring out how to build the kind of coalition they have. Now, one of the things that's clear is Mike Johnson, the House Speaker, is far more interested in moving forward with this mega bill, and John Thune is less enthusiastic about it. And I think he's more pragmatic. And it seems to me that the reason this is, it looks like they're throwing it out there is because they realize their majority is so thin that there isn't much margin for error. But it also means that they have to make sure they don't lose anybody. And right now, when you have the House speakership, barely getting through just last week, and one Republican was decided to vote against Johnson. That's the kind of margin that's going to be difficult for them to kind of keep together. And the problem is that there are so many pieces of this that there are constituencies that may not like it. I mean, when you talk about something as basic as drill, baby drill, and expanding the energy policy, I know that if they include things in Florida, for example, expanding exploration of oil and gas leases off the coast of Florida, the entire Florida delegation has already in Trump's first term indicated that they would be opposed to that. Could they pull all those people together this time? The details of this giant bill and getting everybody together is really, as I said, heavy lifting.
There's a lot of wild cards here, Matt. One of them obviously is Trump himself. Over the weekend, he took to Truth Social and reconfirmed that he favors a big omnibus reconciliation bill. He called it one big, beautiful bill. There's a lot of things in his policies that he likes to call beautiful. So when he designates them publicly as beautiful, he's signaling they're important to him. But then again, yesterday evening, I think, or late afternoon, he said he favored the idea of splitting it up. He went back and forth on tariffs. We can get to that later in terms of the magnitude of the tariffs that he wants to impose on the United States trading partners. But I think one of the tensions here is cosmetic as much as it's practical. And on the cosmetic side is Trump's own need to be seen as a can-do leader who moves quickly, likes to break things, doesn't let the norms of Washington and Congress slow him down. But he then encounters reality, which is that Congress itself is a big, mighty machine that can move very, very slowly. How do you read all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was Thune's original thinking about the two-bill strategy, was that Trump is going to want wins. He's going to want to look like a winner. So they should take the easiest stuff, what he saw as the easiest stuff to build consensus around, and do that as one bill that he's confident they could pass quickly. Exactly what the parameters of an energy bill would look like are hard to say, but it would probably be limited by the Florida delegation, a handful of members from New York. They'll do something. You could pass that, put it on the president's desk, he signs it, and that would buy them time to negotiate a tax bill over an extended period of time. House leadership seems to have sold him on the other idea that a big, beautiful bill is more fantastic and wonderful, and you like it more, but it raises the prospect. So Democrats tried this, right? If you look at what was the Build Back Better plan, it was challenging to describe that bill because it wasn't a bill that did a thing. They rolled together a whole bunch of different priorities, some related to healthcare, some related to childcare, some related to poverty, tax changes, prescription drugs, all kinds of stuff, into a single reconciliation vehicle. And that was a good way for Democratic leaders in Congress to not disappoint anyone. They didn't need to sort of pick and choose their favorite children. But it was challenging to ultimately get a bill done. It fell apart. It almost completely collapsed. And then Joe Manchin and Ron Wyden sort of brought it back from the dead as an energy-focused Inflation Reduction Act. And that's the risk of the big, beautiful bill strategy, is that, it makes it easier for leadership to tell everybody, we're going to do everything. right? I'm not disappointing anybody. But you have a real risk of collapse, and the things, border security, depending on what's in it, you could imagine that working in a bipartisan way. There was a bipartisan bill that the Biden administration negotiated on the table. Trump killed for sort of campaign tactical reasons. Throwing more and more stuff onto a big tax bill with unclear sort of pay fors, fiscal inputs, it's risky. You're raising the stakes, but it's not clear where that's going to get you ultimately.
I think one of the tests here too, Mary Ellen, is how much control does Trump ultimately exercise over his own party? You flagged the House speakership vote last Friday. On the first ballot, Johnson didn't get through. 3 Republicans defected. He won on the second ballot, but Massey of Kentucky was, as you noted, still a defector even then. That's relative child's play, getting the House Speaker nominated relative to everything that's in this bill. What is your sense of whether or not Trump is going to get everybody in line, if he needs to get them in line to get a bill through that he thinks reflects well on him and memorializes a lot of the policy promises he made on the campaign trail?
I think this is an enormous test, and it's going to be very interesting. Has he learned from the mistakes of his first term? He did have a majority when he entered the first time around, and he did pass the giant tax relief bill. Now that's got to come up, and how does he manage it? Now, I think we got a little window in it a week and a half ago when we had the debt relief vote, and there were 30 defectors from his party who said, no, we're not going to raise the debt ceiling. And here we have that as part of this reconciliation package that's going to be renewed again. It seems to me that the president has to go against some of the hardliners on this in Congress who are definitely opposed to, eliminating the debt ceiling. And as that is woven into this, I think it's going to be particularly challenging to see if Trump can keep them together. Now that's where this mega bill can play a role, because there may be trades and transactions that they put little sweeteners in this giant bill to make those people want to have support the bigger package and finance the tax relief. And there also may be other ways they can work with it. They can write the bill so that it sunsets and include other kinds of language that are pieces of it that don't show up on the books right away, and then take credit for the savings that has. And for that reason, this is not something that is going to happen quickly, because they have to work out all these details to win all these votes. I think it's a more divided caucus than Trump wants us to believe, and that's why I think this truly will be a test.
Just a reminder that we also can take questions in real time from any of you watching, and our incredible producer, Mary Newman, will pluck those out of the ether and put them in front of us. We have one that just landed that I want to throw your way, Matt. The question is, what are Democrats saying about this MAGA bill? And does it matter if they don't have the majority, in terms of their own views of the bill to begin with?
Yeah, so Democrats have not said a lot about this legislation, largely because it's not clear what it is. They're waiting to see what's in it. I do know Democrats that I have talked to, their preference is for Trump to do the one bill strategy. They think that is easier for them to oppose, because as the opposition party, the more stuff that is in the bill, the more your members can just find like the one thing that they hate most about it, or that plays worst in their home state or their home district, and complain about that. I heard a lot of concern that a bill focused on energy permitting and border security would be hard for, purple state Democrats to actually oppose. Whereas a huge bill that lumps everything together is a big target. If you remember when the Affordable Care Act was passing in 2009, 2010, there was a big complicated piece of legislation. Republicans would pick out pieces that sounded bad or that they didn't like and just talk about those. And so the bill became very unpopular before it was enacted. But then when they tried to repeal it, it was the opposite. Democrats talked about sort of the best provisions, the things that sounded best, and repeal became very unpopular and it sort of collapsed, right? So the bigger the bill, it's a kind of fatter target for the opposition party, but they're waiting to see what's in it until they really say anything. Right now, Democrats are very much in kind of wound-licking mode, looking over some of these nominees and trying to see what's going to happen there. But, at least the ones I've talked to, I don't want to say they welcome a giant MAGA bill because they're going to be against it, but they think a big bill is a fatter target.
So strategically, it opens more doors for them than breaking up the bill into multiple pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Mary Ellen, is your sense of, the House feels to me like the true repository of the MAGA vibe. Clearly there's Trumpist senators as well, but the most sort of MAGA forward legislators in my mind are in the House in terms of how willing they are to speak out, how willing they are to go their own way, how willing they are not to sort of get in line. This is a test of presidents of both parties. Obviously, Biden, in his term, with the help, obviously, of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, was able to whip, different parts of the caucus into line, which Democrats historically haven't been strong at doing. Is there any sense that Jason Smith has, the bona fides and the wiliness to keep the Marjorie Taylor Greene wing of the House GOP with the program?
I think it's really interesting because, as you mentioned, the House does have more new freshmen, for one thing, and all of them ran on being Trump loyalists. I would say, for the most part, all of them ran being Trump loyalists. And then you have the people who are the disruptors, like Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I do think that it's probably, there was some video of the Mike Johnson speakership vote, and Marjorie Taylor Greene was seen with her iPhone on the floor of the chamber, and Donald Trump was the person she was speaking to. I think,
and I think Susie Wiles at one point as well.
And Susie Wiles, yeah. Or no, it was Susie Wiles that she was speaking to. That the interesting thing there is that I think it's going to be Trump specifically and his staff that have to keep people like Greene reined in. And so, yeah, I don't have a good sense if Smith has the ability to keep a hold on these folks. As I said, they're pretty new at these roles, and I think it's going to be a real test because people have run as Trump loyalists, and who is their allegiance closer to, getting the votes out of the House, or is it aligning with Trump and getting the hardline position that he wants held?
I wanted to spend a little bit of time picking off some of the pieces of this bill to talk about them as both aspirational and realistic in terms of looking at what the priorities for the party are and for this bill, since there are, at least in terms of what people have been signaling, lots of moving pieces inside of it. Whether or not they all get into the bill, we'll see. But Matt, one of the primary elements of this bill is extending the TCJA the 2017 act that significantly cut back corporate taxes and the tax rate for wealthy Americans, individual Americans, on the argument that it would spur reinvestment at the corporate level and give high income consumers an incentive to spend more personally, which would boost the economy, et cetera, et cetera. I think the landing pad around that now has shown that there wasn't a lot of corporate reinvestment spurred by that act, and that wage growth and other economic benefits didn't trickle down to average working Americans. And the cut would get extended at a time when deficits are at historic highs and revenue challenges that the government needs to take on to be able to do its business are also very present. Where is this, what do you think of extending the tax cut, one? And then two, what's the likelihood that the GOP will be able to do it?
Yeah, I mean, they will do something in terms of extending these tax cuts. That's the core commitment, really, of congressional Republicans around this. And I'm sure something will be done. But the question is, what will be done, right? Will they try to make these permanent, which will require them having full offsets of the cost, or will they, do it in a deficit increasing way, but have phase outs? And then what kind of offsets will they assemble? The big issue is that the fiscal circumstances of the United States are very different in 2025 from 2017. Interest rates are, not that high, but they are higher than they were. They are a real drag on the housing market and on consumer spending. Inflation remains above the Fed's 2% target. So if you do something that increases the deficit substantially, you're going to have problems that didn't really exist in 2017. But if you try to make a tax cut of this scale fiscally neutral, you're going to need to roll in some probably very large cuts to Medicaid and other kind of social safety net programs that will be much tougher politically than anything they did in 2017. Lindsey Graham, who chairs the budget committee, also clearly wants a large increase in military spending. That doesn't necessarily seem to be a Trump personal priority, but he is an influential actor in this. It's one of the reasons he wanted the two-bill strategy. So, something will get done. I'm quite confident of here, but it's very unclear what it will be. There's also the SALT question. I'm sure a lot of our viewers are familiar with this, but, Republicans who are from California, New York, New Jersey really want to reverse some of the changes to the state and local tax deduction that were made in 2017. That will further add to the cost of the bill and make the math around this sort of even more challenging. Republicans just haven't said what they are willing to go after on the spending side. Trump did not talk a lot about spending cuts on the campaign trail. During December, there was a surge of enthusiasm from Elon Musk and others for, we need austerity, but he's now pivoted back to boosting European far-right parties. Trump, I don't think, has ever said the word Medicaid, right, which sort of would be the key program in the crosshairs. And this is what Democrats are really waiting for. They're kind of there in their bunker, and they're going to see what's the deficit impact of this going to be, what are the rollbacks on working families and the poor going to be, and that's where we're going to go after them.
Mary Ellen Matt invoked Lindsey Graham, who also said recently that he'd love to see about $100 billion in spending on border enforcement, which obviously immigration and the border were possibly the most powerful talking points Trump had as a candidate and the party has had. I think Democrats failed to tackle that issue soon enough. And it remains a very present both public policy, humanitarian, and economic issue for a variety of different reasons. There's a lot of, it will be interesting to see what this bill has in it about immigration and what they tackle soon, what they tackle later, whether that gets broken up into multiple pieces. But there's one part that's just about funding the machinery we use to process migrants and visas and asylum claims at the southern border. And then there's a larger piece of this that is Trump's desire to move 11 million migrants out of the country, house them in temporary camps, and send them back home. How do you see that shaping up as part of this bill and as part of policy within the administration?
I do think that it's going to be interesting to see how Republicans and Democrats, where their differences lie on this, because I think there are some things, as you mentioned, just the mechanics of processing asylum claims and getting people through the immigration process that Democrats will be on board with. I mean, they've already most Democrats have already been behind the bipartisan bill that Trump sabotaged, and so finding agreement on some of those pieces of immigration reform will be, I think, possible. The big challenge will be what happens when he wants to use state power to, go into businesses and show up at schools and start ripping families apart. And the massive deportation elements. I think we've already seen, there's been some reporting on people kind of the administration already starting to peel back the claims of giant deportation. And so, how all this, what's going to happen next with some of these pieces will be very, I think, very telling about how far they're willing to go here.
Do you, just to stay on that for a moment, Mary Ellen, do you think, do you see a point in which Trump would press constitutional norms and try to use the military to door knock and to see how far he can get with that rather than rely on the National Guard at the state level? Or local police forces at the state level. Is he willing to test it to that extreme?
I don't have a sense of that. I think that is very precarious and very dangerous. I think there are states where they will eagerly allow their state police forces and their National Guard to be a part of this effort. And I think they would be wise to go that direction first before using the military. On the other hand, it does, I'm curious to see what you guys think about this, because I think it's a very fraught place.
Trump has really, I don't know. I would say there's been like a decline in his immigration focus since actually winning. And there's always this mismatch to an extent between what people talk about on the campaign trail and what it is they go, do. We had this kind of blow up around the H-1B visas in which Trump came around just sort of siding with his business community supporters. On the other hand, Stephen Miller's there, Tom Honan is there, very, very strong, tough immigration hawk people have been sort of tapped for high level roles. They're going to run up against different kinds of resource constraints on what it is they want to do. And I think it's just, this and the tariffs, right, are like the big known unknowns of this, where Trump keeps saying things on tariffs and then saying other things. He has appointees who are all over the map on this question. Tariffs might be part of the bill. It might be an executive order. The Washington Post had a story yesterday where they were like, he's actually not going to do the universal tariffs. Then I don't know what you call it, Truth Social posted that wasn't true. And, it's like, we've been talking about this literally for years now and still have no actual clarity on what it is he wants to do or why.
I mean, he clearly loves in the spotlight bravado, whether, he's going to say that he'll be, ex-constitutional and put 11 million people into camps and deport them, or whether he says he's going to do 25 or 30% tariffs on China or Mexico. I think the reality of those things lands hard on him. but he also can't resist bravado and being in the spotlight. And he knows doing bold things and making bold claims, often grotesque claims, lands him right where he wants to be. And yesterday, I think on the tariffs thing, Matt, it's a great example. I think somebody in the Trump camp leaked to the Washington Post that there'd be a more moderate tariff regime, and it wouldn't be as radical and possibly disastrous in terms of trade as what Trump had envisioned. The dollar dropped dramatically in response to that. And then you sort of imagine Donald Trump kicking back at Mar-a-Lago and reading the papers and doesn't like the fact that he's got rogue people within his own team signaling to the Washington Post that he may not be as tough-minded on tariffs as he claims. So he came out and said the other thing, just as he's done going back and forth on the omnibus bill or two bills, et cetera, et cetera. So this is, I think, when the rubber meets the road in a Trump administration as opposed to a Trump candidacy, it's the real world of making mature decisions and keeping a team together as opposed to just getting people riled up and excited about Trump himself. And but I don't think we ever know where that goes, because as we know from the first administration, it was constantly circuitous. We've also run up against the clock. I wanted to talk to both of you about energy and everything else, but we'll save that for maybe when this bill finally lands and we know what it really looks like. But Matt Iglesias and Marilyn Kloss, Bloomberg Opinion columnists, thank you for joining me today. I'm Tim O'Brien, and we'll see you next week with another Bloomberg Opinion live stream.
Bye.
Bye-bye.